Join you. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, Monday, not a typical day, but why not? Let's see how it goes. I want to put this conversation a little bit in context in case you don't know. So we're here at the World Urban Pavilion in Regent Park. It's a beautiful space if you've ever been before, where we just actually wrapped up our exhibition that was here for the last 6 weeks. But the exhibition was on new neighborhoods, and I actually put a link in the chat, so you can download the copy of this guidebook if you want to review while we're talking. And we added Regent Park as the 10th neighborhood to our study. And when we thought of a location for the exhibition, which is work that we did with School of City at University of Toronto, we thought, what a better place in Toronto than Regent Park. Like, we literally couldn't think of one. So that's when we added Regent Park to our guidebook, and I encourage everyone to take a look and review it from the urban planning and urban design aspects that we covered in the guidebook. And for mostly we started this, for those of you who are not located in Toronto and couldn't see the exhibition, we hosted a series of the minds behind the new neighborhoods. I think this is session number 5, so you can go back and see. Some of them were virtual because the neighborhoods that we chose were not located in Canada. And we had two with the minds in Toronto. So now we are here for the last session with a very, very special guest, Joe Cohen. Thank you very much for being here. Not only that we are here in this context, we are also had a very good timing with the launch of the book. So I actually asked Mitchell to start by reading not a chapter, a verse. There's a new word that I learned that I felt from the book that was kind of a recipe for urban planners. So we will kick off this conversation with that. I prepared some questions. It will be a conversation. Feel free to type your questions in the chat as well, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. So the book Rhythms of Change that came out last week, as you mentioned, it tells the revitalization story of the story of our partnership with Toronto Community Housing over the last 19 years. As said, I'm going to read a verse from the book. Verse 6, Roots of the Revitalization. In the early 2000s, the Harris government took its common sense revolution a step further, downloading responsibility for existing affordable housing to municipalities without the financial tools to retrofit and maintain homes in desperate need of repair. Toronto inherited 58,000 homes, the vast majority of which had been allowed to deteriorate for decades. It was a nightmare scenario, the second largest social housing portfolio in North America, downloaded by the province along with a repair backlog that quickly grew to over $3 billion. The City of Toronto responded by establishing Toronto Community Housing, a wholly owned subsidiary that would own and manage the portfolio. TCH, Toronto Community Housing's inaugural CEO, Derek Ballantyne, recruited from Ottawa's Housing Corporation, quickly recognized that the new housing company would need to be much more than a property manager. TCH would have to become a developer. With that in mind, Ballantyne recruited Mark Guslitz as Chief Development Officer and a member of the executive team. Guslitz was a seasoned nonprofit housing developer. His mandate at TCH was clear: identify opportunities to substantially increase density in neighborhoods across the portfolio. 2, create value through intensification. And 3, leverage that value by engaging the private sector to create mixed income, mixed use neighborhoods through revitalization. In assessing how to kickstart that process, Ballantyne and Guslitz applied the 3 primary rules of real estate investment: location, location, yes, and location. With those rules top of mind, it did not take long for Regent Park, a low-density neighborhood within walking distance of downtown, to rise to the top of the agenda. Although location was a key factor, equally important was that Regent Park residents had engaged in deep discussions about the future of their community for close to 10 years. That history of activism was critical, dating back to the early 1990s, when the North Regent Park Steering Committee pushed the provincial government to do something, anything about deteriorating living conditions. At that time, the province was only willing to entertain a planning exercise on one small quadrant at the corner of Girard and River. Although this think small approach failed to launch, the unintended consequences have resonated through the decades. In short, that initiative brought residents together with urban activists, including former Toronto Mayor John Sewell. Everyone shouted hell no to a piecemeal approach, leading to hundreds of meetings in kitchens and church basements throughout the community. Emerging from that work was the all-important right of return, a contractual guarantee that tenants would be welcomed back to a new home within their community. This commitment became a fundamental building block for everything that followed. Hand in hand with the right of return was an agreement that tenants would continue paying rent geared to their income, and that their new home would be right-sized to reflect family composition. In other words, a family moving out of a 5-bedroom townhome would be able to move into a new 5-bedroom townhome if their family size remained the same. Overall, the result was a set of principles under which a comprehensive revitalization would work for everyone. Verse 6.
Wonderful. Okay. So thank you for that. I think that's a wonderful thing for this conversation. And there's also on page 34 a very clear list of almost a recipe.
The principles, that's right. Exactly.
Okay. When I think, and what I think is important to acknowledge that this exhibition and the research we did was for new neighborhoods, for those that come to almost a blank slate and saying, what can we do here? Regardless of the density, because of some of the densities that we covered were low density, with community-oriented planning processes. This is an old new neighborhood.
Sure.
And for me, what really stands out is the true partnership between government and the private sector, something that perhaps today we take for granted. We just say it as, part of a sentence. And what I loved about verse 6 is that it really revealed the beginning of it. Something that perhaps wasn't so much taken for granted in those days.
It wasn't.
It wasn't.
No.
Take us through this. What
Sure.
did you learn? What do you want our audience to know about this type of partnerships moving forward?
Well, I think one of the key lessons of this entire process is the public-private partnership. That was not taken for granted. In fact, when we responded to the city's request for proposals, we proposed a partnership approach, but their RFP did not allow that. So we lost, we didn't win it. Because we felt very, very clearly. And that was based on listening to people in the neighborhood. We had come and spent a lot of time on the ground in this community, listening and learning and trying to understand the hopes and dreams of local residents. With that in mind, when we began to look at the request for proposals, it was a request for us to buy density and simply become a condominium developer within this community. And we thought, no, it can't work like that. We have to be on the same side of the table as the public sector. We have to be partners, and then together, public and private, have to develop an approach that is actually a partnership with the community. Because ultimately, what Regent Park has done is turned on its head the old notion of neighborhood renewal. which has typically been a top-down approach where neighborhoods are bulldozed and people living in community, even though the community needs repair, those tenants living in that community are typically pushed even further to the margins. So this turned that on its head by saying the voice of the tenants is actually at the center, the top of the agenda. So we knew that from our work in the neighborhood. We lost the first bid, but fortunately, Toronto Community Housing wasn't able to consummate with that first developer that they selected. It blew up in smoke within the first couple of months. And they went back out to tender again. And they sent out the document, and we looked at that RFP document. It was the exact same document. We thought, oh my God, it's the same. So we can't win this. But we got to the very last page, and Toronto Community Housing, to their credit, looked at what we had said, looked at the challenges, and said, okay, in the very last page, an alternative development framework is allowed in the response. And that is exactly what we had called our proposal, a true public-private partnership in which risk and reward are shared. So the second time around, Toronto Community Housing embraced that approach. Going forward, I don't know that I agree that what you said, that public-private partnerships are the way of the world today. What we're finding still is that government wants to download risk to the private sector. Say, it's your responsibility to build affordable housing. In my view, in our view, and certainly over decades of working to create affordable housing, it has to be done through collaboration, through partnership.
I didn't mean this in the way, it's common. I meant when you hear that term, you don't stop and think, oh, what is that? I've never heard of this.
No, you're absolutely right. It is much more within the vernacular. Now we have to get it into.
Yes, totally. for sure. I have a beautiful view to the neighborhood.
It is lovely.
Lovely.
And sunny today.
I know. We got closer to the window. Tell me, what is it here that we perhaps, again, I don't want to say take for granted, but that wasn't in the original plan, and you, as part of the process, figured out that without it, it's not going to be what it is today.
I appreciate you asking that. When we were actually embraced by Toronto Community Housing back in 2006, we looked at the overall plan. There was a master plan. It had been approved, and it had 6 phases. We looked at the phasing plan, and one of the first things that jumped out to us is that the park in Regent Park was in phase 5. That was one thing that we said, this doesn't make sense. The park has to be now. This is Regent Park. We have to create a park. It has to happen immediately in order to build momentum for what this community could be. And so we put forward a proposal to the local councillor, Pam McConnell, to Toronto Community Housing, and said, we need to change the phasing. And they said, absolutely. This is why we brought you in as our partner. We want to get your advice. We want to listen to you in terms of how the building blocks of this can be put together in a rational way, a way that will work for everybody. So the park was one. But the other part of it is that one of the key fundamental building blocks of everything that's happened here as you look out this window was a document called the Social Development Plan, the SDP, which is a hugely important document. In fact, more important than the zoning bylaw. The zoning bylaw has teeth from an authority point of view, governing authority. But a zoning bylaw evolves and changes over time. The Social Development Plan is a vision. It's an aspirational document that says, this is what we want this community to be over the next many, many decades. So we looked at those 2 documents, one that was the governing authority, which is zoning, one which was an aspirational document, and we said, the SDP has to take primacy. That has to be the document that governs how we think about our work. So in looking at that SDP, it was so clear. It said, over 70 languages are spoken in Regent Park. People from all over the world live here. There needs to be a place where all people from all cultures and backgrounds are able to share their music, their spoken word, their theater, their drumming circles, to bring their culture from back home and share it with others. There needs to be a cultural hub, a cultural center. We read that in the SDP document. Well, that's pretty clear. We looked at the zoning bylaw. There was no cultural hub. And we said, we have to figure out how to do it. So I have a really important architectural tool in my toolbox. Do you know what it is?
No.
Whiteout. Do you know whiteout?
Yeah.
You know whiteout. I took my whiteout and I whited out a few buildings and I said, right here in the center of this plan, the center of the 69 acres, can we envision an arts and culture center? And so it was that process that said, let's find a piece of land. Key to it, though, was showing Toronto Community Housing that not a square foot of density would be lost. So that density from where we whited out and said, that's an arts and culture center. We took that density, added it to this building and that building and this building here and that building over there. So we could say to Toronto Community Housing, not only is there zero density being lost, but the value of every square foot of that density will be enhanced if we're able to create an arts and cultural hub. Fast forward a few years and Daniel Spectrum was there, a 60,000 square foot arts and cultural hub that brings people together to share their art, to share their music. And I think maybe most important, to create this place where people can go. And it doesn't matter that you're an owner or a tenant, or I'm a tenant, or you're an owner, you're sharing experience, you're sharing the theater, music, culture from all over the world, and finding those places of intersection where people can come together and find common ground through music, theater, through culture. That's the key to building social cohesion.
You said something that in a way triggered our entire research. You had a vision, you had a master plan, TCHC provided you, and we started this new neighborhood studying because we wanted to see built neighborhoods that were once just a vision and how they have evolved, what changes, and that's why we have a lot of focus on the public realm, transportation, the phasing of it, because we hear that from our clients all the time. That story about park is coming in phase 5, not the first time I've heard that.
Okay.
And I think that's exactly what we can learn, because you see that now, and I even moved to Toronto. This was already maybe not done, but definitely I've seen the after the after photo of it. And it's so interesting to look back and study the phases and those turning points that you had to make a decision that resulted in what we see today. And I think it's fascinating to go back in this time tunnel, if we may. And that leads me to my next question about traveling back in time. I was here on your book launch on last Tuesday morning, and you said something about the Garden City, that how it was anti-street, all the things that we urban planners know from Jake Jacobs' kind of Jane Jacobs 101. And you said it was not only anti-streets, but also believed that we need to kind of wipe out cars and car access. Something that we talk a lot about all the time even is how we're still very much planning for the car, and cars are very much dominating our public space. A lot of our streets the streets grid here was kind of existing because we are part of the fabric of the city of Toronto, but we still, when we have the opportunity to work on transitory after development, we still come and deploy very large transportation guidelines that result in a pretty massive wide streets, very car dominated, where we have the opportunity to do something. I'm looking here, the width of the street, of the sidewalk is phenomenal. And I know this because my family doctor is in this building. I know it every time I'm here, I'm like, oh my God, look at this sidewalk. what, in your opinion, is the balance between, okay, we clearly learned our lessons, excluding cars or creating pedestrians, no eyes on the street kind of fabric is bad.
Yeah.
We know that. We passed. We moved forward. Between the way we are still designing today, that is from an urban design perspective. So this is more of an urban design question. What are your lessons about the roles of cars in master planning and urban design in the way we live? And you walked here today,
I
right?
did.
So
I walk
so you didn't drive. Yes, you didn't drive here, which I appreciate. So
Sure.
where are we going with cars?
Where we're going in the right direction, but not nearly fast.
Yes.
I mean, I think there still is a residual engineering bias as opposed to an urban design and a pedestrian-centered bias. How do we create the relationship between the building, the ground plane, the pedestrian? I think we're moving in the right direction, but it's been a struggle in that the engineers want the streets to be like this, and urban designers and city builders want the streets to be like this, and it's that push-pull. You know, we have the extra challenge here. We used to have snow. Maybe we don't have snow. We have to figure out how to reverse that trend. But, you know, so the engineers continue to push for wider streets, and the planners and so many developers are saying, no, we need to create a pedestrian realm that people feel good about, that sidewalks are, you know, at the top of the hierarchy. Bicycles are a huge part of that hierarchy. And I think we can find the blend. Here, the blend is working pretty well. And I'm thankful, thank you, that you recognize the width of the sidewalk.
Yeah,
There's a lot of thought went into that with the city, Regent Park Ave, for sure. So I think we're moving in the right direction, but you know, there's so much of that car dominance that has hurt how our cities have evolved. In particular, I mean, we're not here to talk about the suburbs, but oh my God, we messed it up by completely depending on cars, by completely designing suburbs. I think that the notion is unidimensional design, like just to design residential, separate from office, separate from retail. I mean, that has been a way. We can't do that anymore. And I think there has been and is a movement towards that integration of uses. Creating a complete community is how we refer to it, so that people live and work and play and go to school and go to the community center. And it's all sharing the streets, sharing the pedestrian zone. That's what we have to do more of, people vigilant. It is happening. So I'm optimistic. Planning and the urban designers are beginning to push further into the engineering scope to say, we can have wood earths, we can have streets that double as other things. And there's many examples throughout the city now where that happens.
That happens.
And let's just keep building on those and say, look, this is successful. We don't need to go back to the wide street.
Especially if you're living in a mixed, as you said, mixed income, complete community. I always say you can't talk about affordable housing and then forcing them to own a car at the same time. Cars are not affordable.
Yeah.
I want to be respectful of the time. If we have any, yes. First of all, is there any question that maybe I missed? I mean, I have more questions. We're 5 minutes on the.
We're only 5 minutes.
I know.
Well, then you should ask.
But tell me, is there?
Well, I just want to say that I came to your presentation and all, and I just want to say the work that you're doing is to bring people together to talk about neighborhood design and how it works over a long period of time. That is so important.
Thank you.
So well done.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Research.
My last question, and then I'll take some questions from the audience, is something that is very unique about the book is how kind of definitely brings the rhythms, but you have those stops on individuals.
Yes.
And I thought that was, first of all, I believe not enough credit is given to the team and individuals and leaders behind these works. Anything that you would like to comment on? You know, I want to leave it kind of as an open question, but anything, maybe one story in particular from those individuals, or, you know, how it came to be in the book that you kind of honored these individuals. I thought it was beautiful.
But I mean, it goes back to this notion of collaboration. The book has to be reflecting of those values. And it was really important to highlight, to honor people who have been part of this process, whose vision this was. We are here implementing a vision. You know, it's not that we came in and said, this is what we got to do. We read that document and said, how do we work with community to implement that vision? So celebrating the people who developed the vision, but then worked so hard over so many years to implement that vision. That was hugely important. So if that came across,
Absolutely.
hallelujah.
Absolutely.
That's great. So
Okay,
I'm
I'm reading your questions on my phone, but please excuse me that it's on my phone, but it is because my laptop is over there. So, okay, maybe we actually should have known that the ratio between TCHC units and market units. Do you know that by heart?
Yeah, well, it's an evolving thing. I mean,
Mhm.
when the whole revitalization started, the aspiration was that it would be 60% market and 40% RGI, rent geared to income.
Wow.
That was the aspiration. But as it evolved, Toronto Community Housing understood it. We all understood that the financial formula didn't work with that ratio. So a series of rezonings happened that increased the number of market units. Key, though, was the 2,083 social housing units were here on day one.
Yes.
And that had to remain a sacrosanct minimum. So there are some additional affordable rental units that have been built in addition, but the ratio probably today would be 75 to 25. What's the right ratio? I don't have the answer to that. You might have the answer to that.
First of all, I think I'm here, this is not a scientific answer,
No,
but
okay.
I'm hearing from clients that if rental replacement units, and definitely there's this scale component to it, but let's take a typical rental replacement unit building, the rental replacement units need to not pass 15% of the total new units in order to make the numbers financially work today. So that is in an individual building. I believe in that there's a very interesting question that I will let you answer. If Regent Park was done today, what do you think, would you, I don't know, maybe do anything differently, or do you think it will be, the density was higher, you would do anything differently? If you would start the process today?
Well, you know, let's play in the hypothetical world.
Yeah.
I mean, in that hypothetical world, we would have loved to have more support from different levels of government to integrate affordable rental into market buildings and to integrate affordable home ownership into condominiums. We had a very limited amount of money that we were able to do shared equity second mortgages. So the tenants living in social housing could become homeowners. That pathway to home ownership is so important. The model exists. We know how to do it. You know, going back, if there was a bigger pot of money to do that, so the tenants living in social housing could see that pathway, plan for it, save money for it, learn about home ownership, that would have been a lot better. We also made a number of proposals to Toronto Community Housing along the way about integration of social housing units into condominiums and into market buildings, market rent.
Yeah.
We did that in a market building just down the way there that you can kind of see. And again, the model of integration works, it makes sense. But all of this in terms of creation of affordable housing, the key is government investment is needed.
Yeah.
The more government investment, we would be happy in any new community we're doing to have 30% of assisted rental. So affordable rental of any number of different strata, I mean, down to 40% of average market rent, lower income, to create communities that truly do embrace and are welcoming to everyone. So we would love to do that, but it depends on government investment. And today the government says we have some money, but it's this much, and it doesn't bridge the gap in order for a nonprofit to actually do it.
And we hear city as a builder. The mayor's initiative, city as a builder.
Yes,
You heard it, right?
I've heard of it.
Okay,
I
good.
think it's insane. Oh, did I say that out loud?
That's my question.
Okay.
What is that? Do you think that what you're saying, where risk and reward are shared, do you think that could be one of the, or you don't think this is what?
Well, I believe.
But I see what that.
No,
I see. There's a trigger here. So
there's a trigger. I mean,
yeah.
What I believe is the private sector is set up to take development risk, take construction risk. The not-for-profit sector or the city is not able to do that. That's where partnership comes in. Let the private sector take the risk, buying land, getting the development approval, the entitlements, and building the buildings for a fixed price, and sell that package, whether it's a rental building, whether it's ownership within a condo building. There are so many models, but the private sector takes the risk. The not-for-profit sector, call it the city and an umbrella of organizations that could fall under that, do what they do best, which is find the tenants, nurture the tenants, support the tenants, create pathways for those tenants to post-secondary education, to training, to apprenticeships. That's the role that the nonprofit sector can do across the entire region, across the country. So everyone has a role to play. But for the city to say, we're going to be the builder, we're going to figure out how to do that, I don't think that's the right answer.
And my last question is for me. In September, I visited London, the real London, and I went
here that might object. Go on.
The big London.
Yes.
And I went to Elephant and Castle, and I got a VIP tour. I wasn't a VIP. I was just joined a VIP tour, and there's a lot of criticism against the way Elephant and Castle did certain things. And I raised my hand and I asked, have you heard of Regent Park in Toronto? Because I think you.
Go ahead.
We as Torontonians, listen, in London, UK, I'm a Torontonian and it's a we. But you figured out many things that Elephant and Castle are being blamed, accused, and kind of beep, we'll put a beep at the end. How, now this neighborhood is internationally acknowledged, and I'm interested to hear what type of feedback you are getting from maybe other countries. This exhibition on purpose was internationally studied. I wonder how we, other countries and cities see Regent Park as a model and, contribute to the Canadian reputation. What have you?
Well, very much.
What did people ask you? Yeah.
Well, we are sitting, as you said earlier, in the World Urban Pavilion, which was created by the Urban Economy Forum, which is part of the UN Habitat network of agencies. Because UN Habitat recognized what was happening here in Regent Park. It was a moment when they were looking to determine where should they put a global knowledge exchange hub around urban SDGs, social development goals. Where in the world should it be? And they kind of, by happenstance, stumbled on what we were doing here. I had been interviewed for an article in Bloomberg newspapers, and someone in Nairobi read it and called someone in Mexico City who called someone in Toronto, and they kind of discovered what was happening and very quickly embraced Regent Park as the opportunity to create this global knowledge exchange hub. That's why we're sitting here in this room, in the heart of Regent Park. And what the team here has done has connected so brilliantly to local residents who are part of the storytelling of what has happened. So truly today, people from around the world, and they come and they meet residents from the neighborhood who can tell the story through their eyes, through their personal experience as to what happened. And that's really powerful. So I think people around the world are recognizing the balance of what has happened here is really pretty powerful. There's things that coulda, woulda, shoulda, but on balance, there's a lot of very important lessons to be learned.
That's a wonderful and beautiful ending to our conversation. Thank you very much for being here.
Pleasure. Totally. Great pleasure.
And thank you everyone for joining us this morning. Have a wonderful, it's National Housing Week here in Canada. So what a beautiful and appropriate big start kickoff for this week. Thank you very much for joining us.